Call the special meeting of Cupop to order this evening.
It's really not a special meeting, just for the record.
It is a special meeting, isn't it? Because
because we had it on our list of dates, so therefore it's not a special meeting. It's just a regular meeting.
Oh, because Jerry told me it was special just because we canceled last night and had it tonight.
Oh, okay, maybe okay. Then that's special then. Yep. Okay. I stand corrected.
The storm made it special.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
And so first on our agenda, are you Louisa? Because I don't think we've ever met in person before. So I'm Kim. And so we have your presentation first, which I think is great, so you can, carry on your merry way afterwards.
Yeah, we've got a sorrow meeting after this, so
Since Marty's not here, I'll start taking notes.
disappear quickly.
Hi, Louisa.
Hi. So, my name is Louisa Cunningham. I'm here to represent the seven-member committee, Best Organic Outdoor Management and Maintenance Practices. We were charged by Ellen Scalater with making recommendations for wildlife promotion and organic methods for the town. Initially, we focused on our efforts on Fitzgerald, as you know, having sent you a 5-page proposal for that property. So, knowing that your agenda is packed, I'm going to try to be brief. Our proposal for Fitzgerald includes the following general recommendations. We believe the oversight of the property should reside in one department, namely the Parks Department, reporting to Cupop. This would assure coordination of use, the activities, leases, care and maintenance, and so forth. We also recommend training for town staff in the identification and removal of invasive plants. Indiscriminate clearing destroys valuable wildlife habitat. Also, invasive plants like barberry and burning bush, two invasives that people are pretty familiar with, make it difficult for native plants to grow because they monopolize sun, water, and nutrients. Plants that are not native do not host insects required for the higher levels of the food chain, such as birds. Therefore, to the extent possible, invasive plants should be removed, especially at the field's edge. And by the way, you may have picked up in the proposal the fact that in section 1.6, there's mention of use of herbicides for the invasive Norway maples. That will be removed in our next committee meeting. That was an oversight on my part. Cuttings from clearing should be used to create occasional brush piles for sheltering wildlife. That's fairly common among naturalists. Natives should be planted when possible and necessary to discourage invasives. In order to promote wildlife, such as birds and butterflies, mowing should be limited to the period of November to March for the meadows and for hayed fields after July 1st, with a cut no lower than 8 inches because there are butterflies that lay eggs at the base of plants. We believe the town should revisit the negotiations for a 22-acre easement of Fitzgerald wetlands with South Central Connecticut Water Authority, particularly as development of wetlands is already restricted by town guidelines, as you know. This arrangement would produce revenue from the Water Authority. Patch cutting of trees, something that's generally recommended by DEEP and also Audubon, would diversify the age of the trees and therefore wildlife as well. A patch cut of approximately 5% or 5 acres of the 100+ acres at Fitzgerald is recommended. Signage at the entrance of Fitzgerald about its ecology, flora, and fauna would be of interest to those drawn to the park and potentially assist residents in managing their own properties. I'd like now to turn to specific recommendations for the various areas around Fitzgerald, moving generally from the southwest farthest field to Center Road in the northeast. The southwestern field, which is the farthest field at the end of the road that has the community gardens on the right-hand side, headed towards this field, the southwestern field, is the most logical field to be developed as a meadow. We recommend 3 cuttings there to create a naturalized area conducive to wildlife. One section of it would be cut once a year, a second section every other year, and a third section every 3 years. We recommend the path around the edge be mowed to 2 to 3 mower widths to basically reduce the possibility of or exposure to ticks. The creation of a soft edge around the meadow for wildlife is also recommended and would involve encouraging medium height trees such as, again, cedar, dogwood are common examples, native flowers and shrubs, some of which are already in place. To create a more naturalized look and support wildlife in the central meadow, which is the meadow across from the community gardens, we think a few islands should be created with native plants and medium height trees. Again, an example would be red cedar, dogwood, bayberry, butterfly weed, small islands, maybe 3 to 5 of them, but the rest of the meadow mowed to assure that other trees and bushes don't grow up. The finish line for Amity High's track team, we think should be moved to the parking lot to reduce disruption of wildlife, to say nothing of risk to pedestrians. This would also result in the central meadow, again across from the community gardens, not looking partially shaven at the end of the summer. There's a cut that's done for the high school track team, and we think they could be accommodated in the parking lot. Given the town's no pesticide policy, we recommend that the users of the community gardens sign an annual use agreement that includes the same no pesticide clause required of leasing farmers in the town. I included the language in the lengthier version of this proposal that you've received. Should the rink require improvement, such as enlarging it or putting up walls, we recommend it actually be moved to another town property, such as Pease Place, and letting that very special wetland area just beyond it, adjacent to it, expand for the ducks that you see in the spring, other migrating birds, and wildlife. There's some wonderful natives in there, button bush, spice bush, small willows. It's a really pretty special area. The northernmost fields, so those are the ones on Center and Beecher Road, evoke Woodbridge's farming history, and as such we recommend they continue to be leased to farmers, while being overseen by the Parks Department to assure that they're properly maintained or managed, possibly involving annual soil testing, remediation, cover crops, or nitrogen-fixing legumes like clover. Transitioning to native warm season grasses like little and big bluestem is recommended for these fields, as these grasses require little to no fertilizer and are appropriate for both hay and wildlife. For the sake of wildlife, these fields should be mowed as late as possible, ideally not before July, and not more than twice a year. So that's our proposal in brief. We're turning next to other town properties and then to roadside management, and we'll be back then.
Okay.
If you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to give me a call or suggestions. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Louisa.
Yeah.
Okay, so next on the agenda is reviewing, updating the proposed draft of the community garden guidelines. And so we should have Laura's draft in this packet. And then last meeting, it seemed to me that we really weren't there yet in terms of a final draft. And one of the things that we had talked about was perhaps streamlining a little bit. So what I wanted to do, and probably I should have just waited till this evening to present it to you guys, is just kind of create an example of maybe we just have the application with the streamlined rules on the back and then present it with like sort of like a cover letter saying, and we would recommend that there be a 3-person oversee committee, and then whatever else that wasn't encompassed in the more streamlined version. So I think we should probably talk about that. And I also felt like there were a few things on the rules that not everyone was on board about, and I'd really like us to have a consensus about that. So, can I ask you what do you guys think about, because, back when we were first talking about doing this, before I was sick, months and months ago, what I was getting from the Board of Selectmen was that they kind of just wanted something more official, not necessarily a huge document. So that was where I was coming from.
I basically listened to the reports that the presenters gave us, and the draft that we came up with included a lot of their recommendations, and it was streamlined. It was reduced.
Okay.
So I did go back after our last meeting. I made the changes, all the recommendations that everyone suggested that we make, and so all the recommendations that were made have been updated, and I did include this copy as the application, as well as the NOFA standards for organic land care, so that, because that was something that people wanted to see included in it, even though I didn't call it that, because I was waiting for us to meet in order to decide that this is the one that they wanted to use to include in the draft. So if people had other ideas, that wasn't made clear to me the last time.
Okay.
Well, if we do simplify it, it's not a bad idea then just to take some of these, make them suggestions, and like the compost bins, here not higher than 3 feet, the type of fencing, rather than make them general. These are the rules you must follow if we're going to simplify them. Have the applications and basic guidelines here, and then say, here, by the way, here's our other suggestions, that we recommend everyone follows.
The only problem with that is that then you're going to have things placed on the garden that are going to be taller than perhaps can prevent the next gardener from growing their crops, and that could be a concern.
Right. So then we we talked about that 3-person committee. We could leave it in their hands to say, hey, this is too tall. We think it should come down.
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm reflecting on the last meeting. I believe that Terry Schatz had a version that she'd worked with Laura on that was an application that included all of the summary of all the guidelines. Am I wrong about that?
This is part of it,
Right.
okay? And then she had one other page.
It was on the other side, if I'm not mistaken, right? And that was sort of a summary of the guidelines?
Well, this is very simplified. Yeah, it's very, very
Right.
simplified.
Okay.
See, I don't really like that idea so much. I think it's, because then it can get confusing. You're looking at 2 places to kind of figure out what the rules are. Have it in one document, whether you have it on the back of this or here. To me, 5 pages doesn't seem like a lot. And these, as long as they're pertinent and these are important rules and they're applicable and relevant, I don't see why 5 pages is a lot. It's, you can have the application separate, fill out the
Right.
application, refer to the rules. I mean, you see, it's a lot when you go into a website and you see terms of use. Those are 26 pages. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
But this, I just don't think this is unreasonable. If you wanted to streamline it a little bit, make the font smaller. Maybe take out the first page of the history of things. Maybe that's unnecessary. You can just go right into the bullet points of the rules, and then it's, instead of it being, 5 pages, it's 4 pages.
Okay. That's fine. I mean, we do what everybody wants.
No, I think this is good.
Okay.
I like the way this is set up. I think Laura did a great job on this,
Thank
putting
you.
this together.
I have no quibble with that. I also think she did a great job.
Thank you.
So one of the things I brought up last time, and I thought that maybe I didn't bring it up, as I feel very strongly that the failure to respond within 14 days in terms of someone's plot being too weedy, I really do feel like that's micromanaging and maybe not appropriate. So how do other people feel though? Because this is not.
You're the attorney. What do you think about that?
What page is that?
Or
Is it the time frame?
Third
or
page.
Is it the concept?
Third page.
about-
Third page under the application process number 5. I think it's the time frame, and I also think people. Do we really need to chastise people for it being weedy? Is that done? It's not done right now, is it? I think part of what's wonderful about the community gardens is that everybody has their own little idea of what they want, and people don't really micromanage it. And it's the same thing with the uniform fencing and not using used materials. So those were really the two areas that I had tried to bring up last week. But so maybe I'm the only one, which is fine. And then I'll say, okay, majority rules. Yes.
Do you want to hear from a gardener?
Yeah.
Yes.
thank you.
I'm a pretty fastidious gardener, so I'm not the one that has the tons of weeds. But
Would you just identify?
I'm Sharon DeCott. I have 2 plots at the community garden plus. And weeding is a big job. And I love keeping my garden somewhat weeded. And I love it if it's happening in other gardens. But I think a lot of the people who are weeding don't necessarily have the backs or the strength or the hours to put in. And it would be limiting. And also there's certain times when within 2 weeks your garden just goes crazy and you're away for a week of it, and so I'm not saying we can't emphasize that everyone tends their gardens, but
again, that's something for the 3-person team
Right.
to make
Yeah.
a decision, and it's
But I
gonna be
agree with
gardeners.
what you're saying is that putting a time limitation on it, it can take a long time once your gardens have weeds to actually get them unweeded. So even if you're trying to.
What do you
So-
think is a fair time frame as a gardener?
Well, what I was thinking is more of a general encouragement to be tending your garden regularly, and that you need to be involved. And I would put the emphasis more on that than exactly how many weeds or how much,
But I think
structure.
that we put that
So
clause.
a month.
we-
I mean,
we
if
put
I had
that
to even
clause
choose.
in
Yeah.
for the reason that we're requiring a $50 deposit now, and so that if the garden is left unkept or blighted, then the notice would go out to say, at some point, and it doesn't have to be the first 14. I don't think it reads that way. It doesn't have to be the first 14 days that you're going to get a notice. No, obviously it's going to take some time for the weeds to grow, and it's going to be more like a month or 2 before they're very high. And it's just to have the clause there so that this is what's going to happen to your $50 deposit if the
So
property.
where did the 14 days come from? That was.
What does it state exactly?
But also, as you say, it's not saying that you have to have the weeds out within 14 days. It's saying that you have to respond within 14 days. And I read that as meaning like someone reaches out to you, at least let us know what your take is on it.
So
Right.
respond to
That-
respond
I
to
haven't
a
never- I
notice.
haven't seen
And
any
that you're
of these.
going to actually do something about it, not
Right.
necessarily that everything's got to be all cleaned up with.
Right.
Okay, and-
Exactly.
I worry that the 14 days is too quick if someone's
That
on
could be- I mean,
vacation
that's a
for,
fair point.
But legally,
I don't think
don't
it's a
you
le- I
have
don't- I
to
don't think
don't you
it's a le-
have to give them a time frame?
I don't think it's a legal question, I think it's more of like how strict do we want to be with this,
Okay.
so we can either, put in a time limit where yes, that makes it more clear cut, and that's
What
what I like.
What were
but-
you going to suggest? A longer period of time? 21 days?
I was going to suggest that if at the end of the season it's really a mess, they'd lose their deposit.
Okay, but I think that maybe that's what we're trying to say here. Maybe we should word it differently.
Sure.
That you will get a notice, and then you, probably at the end of the season or at some point, and if you don't respond, then that's when you lose.
Right, if there's a notice and then a
Exactly.
second notice
Yes.
and there's no response, then you know that,
I'm good with
okay.
that.
Yep, okay.
So can I just, I want to take a step back because the application process that's outlined here, and we did talk about this at the last meeting, assumes that the Board of Selectmen
Is going to,
approves
Approves
the
this,
applications.
yes.
And we don't.
Yep.
And we never have.
Yep.
And it's premised on this.
Mhm.
So when I step back from this, it seems to me that what you're really talking about is that your 3-member committee
right,
is going to be the one that's going to manage and monitor the
Right.
application process.
exactly.
And whether it's 14 days or $50 or $60, let them decide it. I don't think that has to be part of your recommendation. You're trying to set up a mechanism that says I forgot what you called it. You had a great name for it, the WGGG, whatever it
Yeah.
was, shall create and manage an application process that should include this minimum information that will exist in perpetuity. So in other words, poor Mr. and Mrs. Stack don't have to stay alive for 1,000
Yeah.
years.
Right.
So the gardens can function.
Right.
Right? Because right now they retain,
They do it all.
they do it all.
Yeah, they do
And
it
so
all.
you need some mechanism
Yeah.
that will survive when they
Yep.
say I've
Exactly.
had enough. So whether it's 14 days or $50, my sense is the Board of Selectmen is not necessarily going to care about that part of it so much as is there a mechanism in place that's going to take care of all that.
Mhm.
So maybe the way to deal with that is just say there shall be an application process. I mean, Michael the lawyer can certainly help you create that language. You don't need me to do that. By the way, only an intellectual property lawyer would think that 5 pages is not a lot. But that's another story.
You just see what I'm reading
That's
today.
another story.
If I could pull out some documents, this is like child's play.
Right, there you go. Right, exactly. I don't know if that's helpful or not what I just said, but given the Board of Selectmen might look at this and say, wait a minute, I don't want to get involved in this level of, is it 14 days, is it $50, is it whatever, because we're not approving the applications anyway. That's my
That
input.
makes sense to me.
but how, where would that, if this is the application and to the $20 is already included, so should we scratch off the $20 too, or?
No, I don't care if there's, I don't think anybody's gonna fuss about that. I think that this section, application process on page 3 is really more directed not to the gardener, but rather to your 3-member committee.
Right,
And say, these are some guidelines we think you
Right.
might wanna put in there. Mindful, of course, what Sharon's saying about, sometimes
oh, yeah,
weeding is not weeding is better for the soil than weeding is, because you want there to be that kind of nutritional replenishment and whatnot. Let them decide that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah,
and I think it
I
makes
think
sense.
that's, yeah, and I think it sounds like your intention, which I really support, is
Right.
you don't want somebody for 2 seasons doing nothing, not enjoying their garden, and
Or
not
putting
letting
junk there.
anybody else
Yeah.
enjoy it. And I think that's a really good thing to have a gatekeeper to say,
Right.
you really need to be gardening if you're here. I think the other part is it's such a great community feeling that really we want you to be, like the
Absolutely.
encouragement part, and that's where the
Absolutely.
3-member team can be really
Right.
encouraging.
Let it
like,
be very hands-on
Yeah.
from
Like-
that point of view. It should be bottom up, not top down.
that would be what
Like
I
flower.
So then it sounds like our biggest recommendation to the Board of Selectmen would be we recommend the formation of a 3-member committee, and by the way, these are some guidelines we recommend, and here's their
Right.
application we recommend, and then.
Right, I mean, there's a
figure it
lot
out.
of stuff in here I still think you want as the
Yeah.
guidelines. I'm just saying that process part of it,
Mhm.
maybe you want to pull out. And we did talk about that the last time.
if we talked about it, I took care of everything. Everything that I wrote down,
Right.
I updated.
Because I think, yeah, okay, well, I said what I thought.
Okay, and can I bring up the non-residents having a plot? If there are available plots after all of the residents take what they want. So I was saying with a sponsor, they could, that's,
Yes,
okay.
we said that as long as they had a sponsor, a non-resident, but it's the ones that already are there
Yeah.
for doing it. If they don't have a sponsor, then,
Their grandfathered in, is what it
well,
says.
I don't know if our,
Perhaps the tri-team committee could help them find one. I mean, that's a lot of,
Yeah, yes.
a lot of places where the committee
right,
could be
exactly.
useful.
I'm sure you would like to be a co-sponsor.
I don't mind, but I'm not a gardener. You're a much better gardener than I am.
I want Sharon to be my gardener.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't mind
I've seen her
co-sponsoring someone that would go
garden, yeah.
weed.
If I could get one little piece that looks like her garden, I'd do
Yeah,
it.
right. I have black thumbs. Okay, so that would, and I just feel like we need to make that more clear that it's okay with a sponsor, because I don't know that it was in here, but that was my reading, perhaps.
So, my understanding is that, so this is where we were, with the draft, right?
That was the draft, and I made all the changes that were recommended
Right.
last time.
And then, Kim, so then we went from here,
Right, and it was
To-
No,
just
actually,
that,
I included it,
right.
because that was a
Okay.
recommendation last time, that we include the application. And I took off everything else, and I just used that application to go with the guidelines that we have, that
Okay.
we've been working on.
But
So
were you-
what's
were
on the
you-
back?
Were you suggesting that we don't need?
I was
Something like
suggesting
this?
that this could be pared down to a shorter letter of recommendations with the example of the application and the rules that the committee, and I was not clear about that. I'm sorry, I was really busy at work and I shouldn't have emailed because I wasn't being clear. So I was kind of, my thought was, oh, so here's an example, I'm gonna do this really quick, what if we just.
So recommendations as opposed to like part of the agreement?
Part of the rules, yes.
The rules.
That was what I was trying to get at. So it really wasn't my intention to differ so much from what we already had, just in terms of how we submitted it and how streamlined it is, that's all.
So do we need to vote on this? Are we including this?
So I know that you clearly, based on what you do during the day, this is very short.
How do you know
This
I
is
do
fine
this?
with
I
you.
do this at night too. It's not just in the day.
Day and night. Does
I look-
anybody feel that this is too much?
Maybe it was just me, and that's fine.
You know, in terms of
No, I don't think it's too much, but it sounds like listening to Susan, we need to, our biggest recommendation is probably we recommend forming a 3-member committee, and
Right.
here's our suggested application and guidelines, and let them handle it. It
Yeah.
sounds like that's probably our best bet.
That
To
would be,
present.
that would be the sense I get. So maybe
know.
the suggestion would be is if Kim feels strongly, or maybe if Michael feels strong, since there's nothing magical about tomorrow night, about getting this to the board tomorrow night, if you want to take a stab at paring this down and then vote on the 2 versions, or work on as a smaller
But what are we going to
committee.
pare down? Well, I mean, you know, we could decide that tonight. You know?
I got the sense that you were struggling with it. It's just a suggestion.
Okay.
By all means, I think if you could
I
do
mean,
it
if
tonight,
there's something
you
that we want to pare down, let's discuss it now.
Okay, so I think some of the language could be pared down a little bit. I think you don't need history.
should. Wait, so, but I want to follow this. What are you taking out?
The history?
I kind of like this.
I do too.
Okay,
Personally.
I mean, it's
but
only a
not voting.
paragraph, but it's, you know, it's for the future, for people to know a little bit where it came from and, hopefully where it's moving.
But who's going to see this? This is for the Board of Selectmen, right?
No, this is going to go to
The gardeners.
the gardeners.
Oh, okay.
The
Yeah.
gardeners will
I
see
mean,
it.
that's the end game here.
Yes.
Is for the gardeners to have some sort of guidepost to know what they can and can't do. And
Right.
I think that's what, right? This
Right.
is what this is supposed to be at
Right,
the end of the day.
exactly.
So substantively, your recommendation is that only Woodbridge residents be allowed to garden. Okay, so that's what's gonna go in the guideline. I have no idea whether or not the Board of Selectmen is gonna agree with that or not. That's just an example of where the
But
substance
then
may.
the
Correct.
board can change
Exactly,
it.
exactly,
The board can change that.
exactly.
These are our recommendation from this commission, and then
Mhm.
if that's what this commission wants, and then moving forward, the board can change the recommendations.
Okay, I'm still feeling like this is a huge amount to give gardeners. And so I'm wondering if the rest of the committee would agree for me to write a draft and bring it back next month, because I'm not sure I can sit here and go line by line. I mean, I could, but it's gonna take a long time. And also I was misunderstanding that this is going to the gardeners, so I think we do need to keep the history. And I think just some of this just doesn't need to be spelled out. So if you want me to go through it now, that's fine.
I don't want to speak out of turn, but one of the first meetings I attended with you all, I think was when we walked around the actual place, and I remember the comments. I remember all the comments that were made that are reflected in this, that people felt very strongly about. So, and I, new to this and newish to Woodbridge, but I feel like people feel very strongly about maintaining the I forget, you had a really nice way of wording it, the natural beauty and so that I kind of feel like does need to be really clear, because people tend to interpret things I kind of like the detail. I mean, I get what you mean, but just as, kind of an outsider, it feels nice and concrete, and this is what you're expected to do if you're going to be in that area. Otherwise, garden in your backyard. I mean, not to be rude,
yeah.
but
Mhm.
I don't know. So,
Well,
but
some of speaking to that particular issue is that some folks just don't have yards big enough to garden like
of
in
course,
the
yes, right.
So if this is going to gardeners, then I'm questioning just the sentence. It is our recommendation that going forward, limited garden plots be made available for use to Woodbridge residents only.
Mhm.
I'm not sure that to the gardeners it's proper to say it's our recommendation, because they're not going to have anything to do with whether or not it goes to Woodbridge residents or not. Do you see what I'm saying?
But I feel like that's just, I should tell me to be quiet. I feel like that's just explaining eligibility. You get something, you're like, oh good, I'm a Woodbridge resident, I can do this. And then if you're not, then you find someone who is, who can be the co-gardener or
Right.
the co-sponsor.
But what if we wordsmithed it so it said something like garden plots are limited and are to be made available for the use of Woodbridge residents only. It just basically take out, it is our recommendation that going forward.
That's fine.
Since it's going to the gardeners and not to the Board of Selectmen. I mean, obviously it's going to them too, but
Yeah,
ultimately.
That's fine. I don't have a problem with that, because we're saying the same thing.
Okay. Each winter okay, that's fine. Okay, so we also recommend this stuff on the second page. It seems like this is directed towards the Board of Selectmen and not to the gardeners. Because we're recommending to the Board of Selectmen, again, that the
We could take that out. That's
Okay.
not a problem.
Okay.
I mean, if we're gonna leave this as gardening rules for the gardeners, that the tri-team will oversee, absolutely.
So that if I'm getting Kim's drift. It's sort of what I'm saying, that anything that's process-oriented, like that section, and the whole application process
Be
section.
separated out from what goes to the gardeners.
And make that part of an application process.
Right.
And the substantive thou shalt nots, to Laura's point, or thou shalls, that's what's part of the guideline. I guess that's what you're saying as well. That makes a certain amount of sense.
There also could be, just a one sheet recommendations for the 3-person committee, right? Which is really,
Well, they can basically, they're in the mud, they're in the dirt, so they, can decide on their own what
right.
their
And I'm just saying things
recommendations
that
are.
like maybe don't have to be in here necessarily, but could be on something for just
Well,
whoever's on that
I don't want to
committee.
micromanage them. They,
Yeah, yeah.
They can make their own decisions on what they think is proper gardening.
So again, let me just make the suggestion again that since we don't have to submit it tomorrow, let me take a stab at breaking this down into directed at the different audiences. And it's not to say that you did a bad job, because you didn't do a bad job. But I think that we're mixing different directions to different groups of people in one document. And I think they should be separate documents.
Well, I think that this should have been recommended earlier. If this was your feelings, so this way we didn't have to have this meeting tonight.
So can this wait a month until we get this submitted and just
yes,
have
there's
it
nothing
briefly?
magical about tomorrow night as far as
Okay,
I know.
so then, yeah, because, I see here, I'm looking through it, there are some questions being asked that just need to be addressed, because just to clean it up, like I'm looking at, like in the application process on page 3, it says, like, why would we have this, for number 1? Do we know, do you want to know if it is vegetables or flowers, people can change their minds, so it seems like stuff like that just needs to
Well,
kind of like be cleaned up.
I think that was the reason for that was, I guess we want to know if it was the marijuana or something like that, right?
Yeah. It's good questions.
Probably.
I think it's a very good question. It's a good point. But I just think
But
that
I'm not-
this could be
but
taken. That
again,
part of
that's
it
up
could
to
be
the
taken
That
out.
gardeners.
assumes that they're going to tell you just because you've got an application.
But that's up to the gardeners, to the tri
Should we appoint
team.
like a plant tester?
Yes.
Make sure
Are you volunteering?
I volunteer enough.
There you go.
All right, so can someone make a motion if that's what we're gonna do is shelve this for another month? And I'm willing to make a stab, and then we can look at the 2 different collections of
Laura?
papers next month.
How about we?
Are
do-
you okay with
Are you okay with that one?
waiting for a month?
No, I'm not, but if that's your decision, I'll just,
I don't feel comfortable rushing to present tomorrow.
I'm sorry,
What's
I
wrong with
interrupted
mine?
you. You
No.
were going to say something.
All I was going to say, however if you want to present it tomorrow, it's one thing. Or what I was going to recommend, if we decide not to do that, then maybe to make sure this is moved forward on a pace where we can make sure we have this done for next month, is that if you want to take the first stab at it, maybe after a week or 2 weeks, you send it around to the group, and then we all have an opportunity to comment on it and provide our edits or whatever, and then have something final for our next meeting. And this way, we can just have one last review of it during the meeting, and that's it.
That would be fantastic. I'm happy to get this done
I
very shortly.
you make the motion and you.
You want me to make the motion?
Yeah, make the motion.
I was just throwing it out there as an option.
Mhm.
All right, so a motion for editing the Woodbridge Community Gardens proposed guidelines where Kim will provide the committee with a draft within how long?
You give me a week, I'll do it.
Within a week for the committee to comment on for our next meeting.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passed.
What about this? Have you decided on this?
I'm happy to include that.
Okay.
I think it's important for people to be aware of, if we're insisting that they use organic standards, I think it is incumbent upon us to educate them about that. I think that was a really good thing to include. Okay, let's see. We tabled the benches discussion until this meeting. Now, is there any urgency with that?
There's no urgency. with that.
Okay. So, do you know that if, I'm asking Susan to see if the Board of Selectmen for some reason has some urgency?
I do not believe there is urgency. I do believe there's a moratorium on the benches
Mhm.
through March.
Right.
Okay.
So if you submit your recommendations on the benches in March, you should be fine. And unlike gardening, benches come up all the time, so it's just a kind of more of a rolling thing.
Okay.
It was March of this year, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to tackle the benches or shelve it and do kind of one project at a time? I'm totally open to either. I know I do have another meeting to get to if I can, but if not, then this takes priority.
I don't believe there are any pending applications for benches right now that I'm aware of,
Okay.
if that means anything to anybody.
So I don't have a problem with waiting with that, but maybe same thing, maybe we could have something finalized, so the next meeting we could just approve it or not approve it.
Sure. Do you want one?
Yeah, well,
Pass it down to.
Okay. I don't really have a dog in a bench fight, so. Oh, I already have one.
is there a draft on the benches?
I had a draft, but maybe Kim.
I
wants to
did
put her
not.
own.
No, I'm fine with benches. Why don't we go over that draft next meeting?
Can you recirculate that? Because I think I may have,
Yep.
it's, God knows where. Thank you.
Okay, is there any old or new business? No, hearing none. Can I have a motion? Oh, Sharon?
I had two things that I thought this might be my only opportunity to say, and one is, and this is the larger Fitzgerald property, and I have no idea if this is really the appropriate moment, but two thoughts I've had that I'd like you to, since you're the governing body for this, it seems like, is water to the Fitzgerald property would simplify and create less traffic and might be something to consider. I know it's a considerable investment. I don't know if the Board of Selectmen, but it would make it easier enough that I think people could tend their gardens better. Wouldn't solve all the problems, but it would change things a great deal. Because by August, people give up because there's no water and it's too hard to carry it.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, why some of the disarray happens. And this is another thing that I don't know if anyone's brought up, but I think one of the larger blights on the whole lovely Fitzgerald property are the toilets. And if any Boy Scouts or anyone wanted to do a composting toilet kind of project, I mean, the technology for that is gotten pretty good. And it would be a whole different, it would make it kind of environmental, and it would be kind of cool. I don't know anything about the tech. I'm just saying that I've seen it be done, and it's kind of interesting. But if you're going to continue this process of trying to improve that property, those are two things that I think would move it in the direction that I think might be good. So that's all. Thank you for listening.
Those are great.
Talk about those,
The
yeah.
water line goes right there, right?
Yeah, I still think it's expensive to get.
Oh, it's very expensive, I
But-
can tell you that.
But I still
Fundraiser.
think it's not far away.
Fundraiser.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a good idea.
I'm a big believer in fundraisers.
Woodbridge Gardeners fundraising.
Sell produce, we'll sell our produce.
And the tri-team committee can head it
That's right.
up. Okay, now, motion to adjourn? Anyone? No, you guys want to stay here?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.